Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to our special Lumen Live session. I'm Dr. Michal Mor, Lumen founder and inventor, and with me, my twin sister, Dr. Merav Mor, Lumen founder and inventor as well.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. First of all, thank you, Angela, also for joining us. Today we are going to talk about metabolic health from the angles of stress management and hormonal balance. We are also going to speak about women's physiology and longevity. I hope we will have time to cover all of it.
And who is better to join us to this conversation than Angela Foster? Angela Foster is leading health and performance coach, podcast host, and the inventor of the BioSyncing method.
Wow.
Nice to meet you, Angela. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited for this.
Angela, I have to share with you that both Michali and myself, we enjoyed speaking with you so much last week, and we could no longer wait to continue our conversation.
Agree.
So thank you for joining. Just a quick note before we will continue. It's important to note that this info in this webinar is only educational. It does not serve as medical advice or a health assessment. Please consult with your doctor before making any changes to your diet or exercise routine. All right, let's start. Angela, before we dive into metabolic health and how exactly stress management and hormonal balance affect it, can you share with us your personal story? I know you have built an incredible legal career, even making partner while being 8 months pregnant. Wow. Yet, that success came with a cost. Can you share with us your personal story? What was the moment you realized you have to make a drastic change in your life?
So unfortunately, first of all, thank you for having me here today, ladies. Super excited to be with you and everyone here. So I think there were many signs along the way, but I left it too late for me by the time I hit real burnout, which was then after I'd had my 3 children. And I was struggling initially with postnatal depression that I had successive bouts of, but it ultimately ended up in a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. And then I was eventually hospitalized with double pneumonia. And that was the point when I hit rock bottom and realized I really need to figure out how to be healthy. And I think we can talk about the signs along the way, because I know many people are experiencing high amounts of stress at the moment. And there are things that I think certainly from a hormonal perspective that were coming up for me before as well, and from a metabolic perspective that I sort of half ignored and continued on. But really that was the defining moment for me. And for the sake of my children, I really, really wanted to get truly healthy. And it all kind of stemmed from there.
Well, I have to say, Angela, this is not the first time that I'm hearing your story. And yet, every time that I hear it, I'm amazed by how determination and the consistency that you had and still have of making a change and improve your health and become healthier and healthier, especially in today's world where it's so much not easy because of the culture of non-stop. We are all the time need to juggle.
Feel that we need to juggle, maybe.
We feel that we need to juggle. And eventually from the physiology aspect of it, when we all the time in stress, so we all the time with those high cortisol, which pushed our metabolism, our mitochondria all the time to rely on carbs. And eventually it's weakened our mitochondria, damaged the membrane, less mitochondria, we become less metabolically healthy, and it's end up with what you just explained that you experience, like as a chronic fatigue, and in the radical cases, even severe risk to our life. So
I think, by the way, that many of our listeners would relate to your stories, since I think stress become a global issue, right? Last time I checked, I think 60% of adult Americans reported that they suffer from real stress that actually impacts their lifestyle. it impacts their sleep, their energy level, mood, relationships. And as you mentioned, it's not only about mood, it's actually harm our metabolism, metabolic health, our mitochondria.
It does, yeah. I mean, it has like rampant, kind of effects across the body as a whole, including mental health, as we were discussing, and physical health and the mitochondria. I think for me, I was diagnosed in my 20s when I was practicing as a lawyer with PCOS, which I know you speak a lot about at Lumen. That at its core is a metabolic disorder. And I think when I started to realize that and I began making changes in my diet, my hormone status started to improve, because actually it would have been very difficult for me from a fertility perspective to have had children. And so I think by making those metabolic changes, that allowed me to go on to have 3 beautiful children, which I'm truly grateful for. But, I hadn't kind of slowed down. And I think that I interviewed Jeff Krasno not long ago, and I think he summed it up really perfectly, because he said, we have been yanged by modern society. And I think that's the thing. There isn't enough yin. There's not enough slowing down, and we almost won't give ourselves permission to do that. So it's relentless in terms of its output.
So, Angela, sorry, go ahead.
So tell me, Angela, I mean, as part of your healing journey, you also invent the BioSyncing methods with practice of day-to-day practice of what we can do in order to manage our stress more smartly. Can you share our audience with what is BioSyncing and where it meets us on our day-to-day?
Yeah, of course. I'd love to. So when I was going on my health journey and I was trying to fix everything, my sleep, my gut health, my metabolism, all these things,
and now
my mindset.
I'm sorry. And now I know you also have like 2 dogs. So this is also something you need to take care of.
This is true, yes. And not just the 3 children, but the 2 dogs. Although everything I keep reading is telling me that dogs help us live a longer life. So maybe I think they're hopefully making a positive contribution, although, yeah, they take work as well. And I think, what I realized along the way was that it was never going to be just about fixing one thing. Health is holistic in nature. And so a lot of the biohacking stuff, which I love, by the way, is also quite male-centric. And so I wanted to find a way of syncing with my female physiology. So that's where I learned more about the cycle syncing method, Alyssa Vitti's work. But then what I also realized is that I needed to sync things with my goals and my values. So my family values. I wanted to spend time with my kids. I wanted to prioritize that. And also, if people listening to this can think about how can you sync with your future self, because I didn't want to make decisions from my past. That was just going to show up as more of the same. And I'd got myself into this very unhealthy state. So I was really visualizing a future where I could be a healthy, vibrant, energized mum to my children. And so really it's about those 3 pillars. And within that, we have this health framework we use called SHIFT. How do you make the shift? Which is where the daily practices come in.
So it's really, what you just said really resonate with, I think, that's what we believe. Can I say we?
Depends what you're going to say, then I will tell you if you can speak on my behalf. You can try.
Okay, so we believe, and on that, as you mentioned, holistic approach. Basically, I think that one of the problems today that people all the time focus on nutrition. But basically, nutrition is not everything. Everything is connected. It's nutrition, it's a movement, it's sleep, and it's stress management. And sometimes we are barking under the wrong tree, right? So for example, it can be that I'm overeating and I will try to fix it by saying to myself, okay, I need more willpower. Where basically the problem is in the stress area. That because I'm all the time stressed, my body all the time seeking for carbs. And that's what pushed me to all the time to overeat. So maybe 5 minutes of meditation will benefit with my metabolism even more than try and avoid carbs where this is not where the problem is. Did I now? Can I say we?
Now you can say we.
Okay.
You agree. Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I couldn't have articulated it better. I think that even when we look at something like cravings, as you say, people will think, well, I must have more willpower, and they'll really beat themselves up. But actually, when we look at biosyncing, we look at syncing with the nervous system, right? And that sympathetic kind of fight or flight with the parasympathetic rest and recovery. And what we see is if people are redlining it all day, quite often they are craving carbs or that glass of wine or 2 or 3, which is, which is an easy habit to fall into in the evening. And that's because your brain and your body is trying to slow you down. And carbs or glass of wine are a really great way to do it. And so actually, when we see people taking micro recoveries during the day and rebalancing their nervous system, they are more relaxed, and they've got this dynamic nervous system, which is also in turn helping with that cortisol management, helping with the glucose management. They'll get better readings on their Lumen, which we all want. Then we feel good, and they don't get the same carb craving. So yeah, it's such a good point. And I think it's about understanding and where are you in this framework? So the way it's the same 4 principles that you're talking about, but I talk about it of how can we make the shift, and shift basically is sleep, hormones, which is our metabolic and sex and stress hormones, the insights that we gather, which is the centerpiece, right? Whether you're using a wearable device, whether you're journaling, whether you're using something like Lumen to see, am I burning carbs and fats as fuel effectively? And then we have the F, which is how am I fueling my body? And then the T is how am I training my body and mind? And that piece you mentioned there is the missing piece for many people, is they're not training their mind. They're not being mindful and meditating and doing breath work and things like that. So I think if, as you're listening to this, maybe even writing on the page, shift, and then looking at it and going, one of these is going to be the domino for me, and being open and honest with yourself. Which one is it? Is it that if I fix my sleep, I now know that I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to make better decisions, and I feel more relaxed? Or is it actually that if I begin exercising and I work on that T, that puts me in a positive mindset, and now my other healthy behaviors are going to follow, and I'm going to sleep better and eat better and do the stress management? So I think it's kind of like, where am I and which one can I pick off first? Because everyone on this call will have a domino.
Amazing. What I also truly love in your story is how you manage to dramatically shift on the health spectrum, like from something that someone who's saying to himself, I don't want to be sick. You tell yourself, okay, and now I'm like an optimizer. I want to optimize my health. I want to feel more energized and be like reduce craving and be in a good mood. And I think it also resonates now I said also we. To what we believe, because eventually health is no longer like 0 or 1, like it's not all or nothing. This is actually a spectrum of, on one hand, you have metabolic syndrome, someone who's truly inflexible, cardiovascular disease, diabetic, and then you can take yourself on the health spectrum towards someone who's healthy and yet healthier, with being very, very metabolically flexible and enjoy all the benefits. I think that you also speaking of regarding being more energized and reduce craving and things like that. I think it's super empowered to hear your story.
Thank you. And I think the thing, I guess, to be thinking about here is to visualize what you want, right? There I was in the hospital. I had insulin resistance, I had PCOS, I had these things I've been battling. My immune system was shot, my mental health, I was on multiple medications for that. And I was neutropenic, my white blood cell count was so low. So you kind of think, well, how can I get from there to where I am today? And the key thing for me was visualizing, as you say, who I wanted to be and stepping into her, and then just taking tiny steps. That's the thing, not putting pressure on yourself. But I think James Clear describes it best when he says, every action you take is casting a vote for yourself. And it's casting a vote for that future version of you. So now that's building confidence, because you're becoming the type of person who engages in healthy behaviors. And I think what's really interesting is we crave what we repeatedly do. So most times when I'm working with people, they're like, I'm just addicted to feeling good. No one ever says, oh my God, I got so healthy, please stop. Like, I don't want to get any healthier. Do you know what I mean? I'm just feeling too good. So it just becomes a positive reinforcement loop.
I was surprised to see in our users that decided that they want to avoid screen time before going to bed was able to wake up on fat burn much more, which is characterized as someone that is become metabolically healthier, right? So when we are in resting and after an overnight fast, our mitochondria should rely more on fat for fuel. I'm curious to hear from your client. I mean, what you see are, the top, Merav told me not say top 3, but still I will ask, what are the top 3 things?
Because usually we hate that when people ask us, well, what are like the secret? What are the top 3?
Yes, but there is no such a thing, right? Because each one of us is unique. So it's like you just can say in average what are the things that you can see. But what are the things that you see that most of your clients benefit from?
Now you phrased it very, very nicely, Nikki. I'm
Thank you.
proud of you.
I'm a lawyer.
You're a lawyer as well.
No.
What would I say? Well, blue light, actually, interestingly, right? It's just the research is coming out more and more about the effect on blood sugar control. So that's really important. But I think also by moving your phone out of your room and not having screen time is that psychological detachment. And that's just huge. So actually winding down before bed in whatever format works for you is something that we see makes a big difference. What I would say is as you framed it, is very bio-individual, because for some people, they might do something like an SDR or non-sleep deep rest or a meditation. And they find that actually because that gives them so much rest, it's quite energizing, and then they don't sleep as well. So I think it's about finding what's right for you in terms of that wind down routine before bed. But the other things that we see is strength training really, really helps with insulin sensitivity and increasing your muscle mass, particularly for women as they go through perimenopause. That's a big one. I think getting the balance right. We've talked a lot about stress. So it's like understanding, do I need to keep layering in more stress? Because there tends to be this kind of, thing at the moment on social media where it's like, well, I must now, not only must I strength train, but I must do high intensity interval training, and I must do cold plunges and have them really, really super cold. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And everything's kind of to excess.
And everything is a must. I must do.
Yes.
Do. And I feel it's really, I think this is how we start the conversation. The feeling that all the time you feel like you must do everything, and everything you have to do now. I think it's also
and every day, all the time.
Yeah, it's also got a lot of stress.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a pressure. And actually, what if it was just better that you ran a warm bath with essential oils? I mean, that's just like really lovely, maybe give yourself permission. So I kind of think of it in terms of like balancing that masculine and feminine energy, because we both have it. Men and women have both of those energetic forms, and we want to be in both. So sometimes we want to be pushing, but we also want to dial things back. So when we see that and people are more dynamic in their approach, that also benefits their nervous system health, which then in turn affects their blood glucose and insulin sensitivity. So we see better results. And then I would say the other thing is really, and this is part of that blue light exposure and things, is just really dialing in your sleep. And I think understanding that sleep timing is coming out more and more in the research as being important. We often think sleep duration, but actually being very regular about your sleep timing is showing to be increasingly important. So if you're kind of good all week, but then, you go and party all weekend, which is fun, but that can have a kind of quite a hangover effect for the following week in terms of your tiredness and just disrupting that circadian rhythm. So I think optimizing the circadian rhythm, restricting that blue light at night, and going and getting access to morning sunlight is really critical, because once you go out and get access to the sun, that sets off the whole chain of hormones. So I think those are important. There's another one. Am I allowed to say another one?
Yes, sure. Number 4.
Yeah.
It was
Are we on number 4 now?
Blue light. It was screens, and it was a
bath with oil.
Bath with
music.
oil.
I like the third one.
Yeah, the fitness and the kind of sleep timing. And then the other thing as well is having protein, because that really improves satiety. You're less likely to kind of go and indulge in the foods that you probably shouldn't be. And it also helps to support muscle mass. So having particularly protein at breakfast, which is something actually that, I really love in the Lumen app, because your protein requirements are always maintained at a really good level, even when the carbs and fats are changing, because I think that's just so, so important.
Yes, we tend to agree. And you touched about, specific women. You're helping like women in the premenopause and menopause symptoms. And this is something I think both of us relate to. And we dedicated a very specific podcast
We did.
specific to women physiology. Let's move into women physiology. So one of the last thing, I think we published it was a year ago, is actually we saw how women in their menopause behave differently regarding their metabolic flexibility. And actually there is a significant decrease in their metabolic flexibility that can explain many of the symptoms they are experience, like gaining weight,
Sleep disorders,
bad mood. It affects their relationships with their lovers. What are the things you specifically recommend to women entering premenopause and menopause?
I love that you've mentioned that, because I think, there are so many metabolic effects of menopause. And I think perimenopause is the time to really focus on your health. I think if you can see it as an opportunity that your body is talking to you and it's showing you the things that you can begin to do. So for example, when we look at fat deposition, it tends to change. So it starts to move from the hip and thigh area to more around the belly area, which women notice they feel uncomfortable about. But that also is a bit more of a risky thing in terms of your health, because that visceral fat, which is around your organs, needs thinking about. So changing the type of training that you're doing. Often women aren't lifting weights by this point. Some are, some aren't. But just understanding that you're not going to get big or bulky, but we need to provide more stimulus, particularly as we get into the later stages of perimenopause. When, if we think about perimenopause over a series of years, and it can be, anywhere from about 2 to 12 years that women may experience symptoms. In the beginning stages, we see a drop-off in progesterone, which can affect sleep, it can affect anxiety levels. But then as we go through perimenopause, we see estrogen go on more of a wild ride, which can affect things like hot flashes. But as estrogen starts to drop, we need a stronger stimulus in terms of that muscle protein synthesis. And both for men and women listening, we're losing our muscle mass by about 3 to 8% per decade if we're not strength training. And we tend to lose strength itself at a faster rate. So optimizing for that by making strength training or resistance work a regular part of your weekly practice is really important. And the thing that I often then get asked is, well, how heavy do I need to lift, right? And this again is going to be, you want to build a very strong foundation. I think anyone going up to a bar and saying, right, I'm going to do 3 reps on a heavy bar when you haven't mastered your form would be very risky and have a high chance of injury. So I think working with a practitioner or trainer to really get that function right, first of all, the functional movement patterns. But then over time, when you're lifting weights, you want to have in your mind that you're lifting to a rep range that is 1 to 3 reps in reserve. So, you don't want to have to go to failure, but you want to go close to the point that I can't do any more with good form, so that we're getting enough stimulus. And then post-exercise, it's important for women to refuel post-exercise, because what that does is signal to the body that there are resources to rebuild tissue and things like that. And that's, women have less flexibility in those terms than men. I also think that high intensity interval training can play a part, but I think that, again, we overuse it. And sometimes what's happening is we're not going intense enough and we're going for too long. So I think keeping this very short and sharp in terms of doing something like sprint training, where you have a 20, 30-second sprint and then you recover for a longer period for, a few minutes, and then going back again, can also be very helpful, alongside things like just walking. Walking is amazing. Walking is amazing for your health. And it just releases so much stress. It improves insulin sensitivity. So I think that, one of the things to think about is how much movement am I getting in? And if you're busy, because I know lots of people are like me, is then about, how can I bring this in a way that fits with my lifestyle? So it doesn't have to be a long workout. Maybe you can take some calls as you go for a walk. There might even be people that are on here now that are out in a walk in nature while they're listening to us. That's wonderful. Doing something like that, so that you're kind of doubling up, if you like, your habit stacking, can make it more accessible.
Great.
I want to add the physiology aspect to what you just mentioned, right? So for all the audience, right? I mean, when we train and we lift weight, we basically increase the amount of muscles that we have in our body. muscles are packed with
mitochondria. It was so obvious for me that after Angela will finish explaining us how she recommends to deal with menopause symptoms, this is exactly what you're going to say.
Merav,
I swear, I just knew every word you're going to
Merav
say.
is counting the amount of mitochondria I'm saying in a session. I think I reached to 20 sometime.
Oh, it's a secret. I will tell you later.
So muscles are packed with mitochondria. And basically, the more mitochondria that we have, we are more able to use fat and we are more able to convert the food that we eat into energy instead of stored it as body fat. So this is for that. And I want to add to what Angela just mentioned that walking we are underappreciate the impact of just taking a walk, even 10 minutes walk. Since it's like, because it's improve our insulin sensitivity in a way that it's open the gate on our cells. And by that, when we consume food, instead of storing it as fat, we just use it to produce energy, even without the needs of insulin. And by that, we all the time improve insulin sensitivity. So thank you, Angela, for that. You give me the opportunity to mention mitochondria 3 times more.
And mitochondria, right, is the core of our metabolism, as you say. I think what I would say as well is when you're thinking about your mitochondria is think about how long you're going out for a walk for. So we definitely, we see improvements, as you were saying, in insulin sensitivity at 10, 20 minutes. But if at the weekend you can go a bit longer, we see more mitochondrial biogenesis when you get to 30 minutes and even more at 45 minutes. So if you can go and do something, you can maybe take your kids along, your family, or walk with a friend and just go at a brisk walking pace. That will also really help for a bit longer as well at the weekends, if you can't fit that in the week.
In addition, what we also saw in our users that female, especially in their phase and the perimenopause, menopause, when they consume complex carbs combined with protein and fat 2 hours before going to bed, it stabilizes their blood sugar level. And by that, they enjoy better sleep because during perimenopause, menopause, because of the reduction in insulin sensitivity, we sometimes experience those drop in blood sugar level during the night, and we all the time waking up, which affect our mitochondria because then there is less time for our mitochondria to repair itself. And when we wake up in the morning, we wake up tired. If you will measure your metabolism, you see that your mitochondria is not able now to use fat for fuel.
I know that both of you talked about the things you should do, and all the time I'm like the bummer saying about the things you shouldn't do, all the scary stuff. So I think one of the things worth mention is intermittent fasting, which is definitely a strategy that I know that many women embrace. And I think we should be also very cautious with this strategy because of muscle breakdown. Many of us tend to take the general guideline about fasting for 8 hours, and especially women in their premenopause and menopause, this is something they need to be very cautious about because we might get our body into a stress mode and then it will break down our muscle and we're actually going to get the exact opposite effect from what we want. And again, we're going to break down muscle, we're going to lose the mitochondria, Mikey, the powerhouse of our cells, and it will damage our metabolic flexibility and will actually, we will find it more difficult to maintain our health and a healthy weight as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think time restricted eating, where you stop, as you say, stop eating kind of 3 hours or so before bed, and then you have a 12-hour overnight fast has been shown to be positive. But I don't think that the new research that's coming out, as you say, is not supportive of longer duration fasts, both actually in men and women now.
Yes, and also it depends. The benefit of intermittent fasting, it depends on what is your fasting window. So if you fast, for example, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's not the same if you fast from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And this is also something I think that's very aligned with the BioSyncing method and circadian rhythm, because eventually our hormone everything connect. You cannot trick your body. It's not the same thing like not eating during the night versus not eating during the day.
Yeah, absolutely. That circadian timing, I think, is really, really important. And I think that's the other mistake people make, right? Is often they'll push that fasting window. So they'll skip breakfast and actually they won't start eating. Sorry, they'll push the eating window till past midday. Whereas actually when we look at circadian alignment and circadian rhythm, it's much better to have the eating window within daylight hours. So as you say, sort of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then have an overnight fast where you're resting. And that helps with your gut health as well. And just that all the renewal.
Angela, you also speaking a lot about HRV. Can I pick your brain about that as well, please? And how
Sure.
you see that, how we should manage that, and what is the impact that you see it has on our metabolic health?
Yeah, of course. So what we do is that when we work with clients, they're often tracking it using either something like an Oura ring or a Whoop strap, or maybe they have an Apple Watch. But we'll also take measurements, continuous measurements, to see what's going on. And I think that people get competitive about HRV. So the first thing I want to say is let's not compare your HRV to others. There's not like a standard HRV in the same way as there is with something like your fasting insulin or your HbA1c. So let's not be competitive. Be competitive with yourself and look at self-improvement. So part of this is genetic, part of it is aging, and then part of it is lifestyle. So the way I see it is we have control over two of those pillars, because if we can be biologically younger, we can help with our lifestyle to do that, and our nutritional and all the other choices we've been speaking about, we can improve our HRV. But we improve HRV by not avoiding stress, because then we don't have a dynamic nervous system. So the answer is to really embrace stress that is positive, but make sure you have enough recovery. And I don't see that people necessarily, unless you're an athlete, you're in danger of overtraining. For most people, what we're doing is we're just not having enough breaks. We're not having enough recovery. We're maybe not hydrating well enough. We're not looking at our sleep timing, which again comes back to that syncing. Is if we're syncing with our circadian rhythm, with our hormones, then we generally will see our HRV improve. And you can see those improvements over time. Zone 2 training has been shown to influence morning sunlight, breath work, and time-restricted eating overnight. All of those things improve your HRV. And so I think it's a really useful metric that's objective about how much capacity you have, if you like, how well you're handling life stresses. And so what we want to see is that we're not seeing big drops in HRV, or that we're trending down a lot. We want to stress our system. We might see a bit of a drop because maybe we've done a harder workout or we've pushed ourselves. And then over time, we want to see it coming up. So we haven't explained what HRV is, but I assume people know.
I think
Or
maybe
we can explain it.
maybe you should.
I think it's probably worth doing, isn't it? So everyone knows what resting heart rate is. So if we sat here now and took our resting pulse, let's say the average person has a resting pulse of 60 beats a minute, we wouldn't expect it to be 1 beat per second. There's actually interbeat variability, and that's what heart rate variability is looking at. And if we see more variability, that tends to show that we are handling stress in our lives better. And so it's another metric that people can track alongside Lumen to see how am I handling the stress, and how might that be impacting the readings that I've got on my metabolic health.
It actually reflects kind of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system in a sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we should, sorry, Mikey. Mm-hmm. And I think also what we should be, and we should understand, there is something we call like acute stress, momentary stress, that is actually when we do exercise, right? We get our body into a stress mode, but it's considered to be a good stress, a momentary one, acute one, versus a chronic stress that can be due to very, very hectic lifestyle. I think as we open our discussion, that we juggle all the time. We're all the time in a constant stress of I have to do this and I must do this and everything. And sometimes it's a little bit too much and too much expectations. And this is a chronic stress that we want to avoid, and or at least to manage. And there are ways we can manage a chronic stress as well. Mikey, do you have 3 concrete recommendations how to help people to manage chronic stress? 3 or 5?
Yes, but I want, first of all, to refer what Angela mentioned about that we should not compete around the HRV, and that this is a metric which is subjective, and you need to track after that based on basically, it should be personal for you. I just had, I think it was yesterday, a conversation with one of my friends that is using Lumen for a very long time. And he said to me, look, Michal, it was amazing to see. Usually every day I wake up at Lumen level 2. I'm burning mostly fat, which is an indicator that I'm healthy. And suddenly I started to wake up on Lumen level 4. And I started to investigate what I did different, and he couldn't find. And then he looked on his HRV, and he saw that suddenly his HRV, his recovery reduced. And then he matched the cause and the effect. It's like eventually our metabolism is like, it's the end of the funnel. There are many things that can affect our body. It can be stress, HRV, and it can be nutrition, affect our glycogen stores when we are all the time with full glycogen level. And it can be that we are not getting enough sleep and it damaged our circadian rhythm. And by that, it messed up with our metabolism. So for me, it was super exciting, to be in that moment when I see someone that is suddenly connect between the two dots of, oh, this is why today my metabolism is off. This is because I didn't recover properly. And now he's able to take smarter decisions. It's like a reverse engineer. It's like by measuring, by understanding
kind of self-validation,
by understanding the end of the funnel, you can go on up of the funnel and see what are the things that might cause that. And by that really take smarter decision of what you should change. Is it maybe I should drink more water, as you mentioned, and maybe I should give myself, my body more time to recover because even though I'm not training too much hard, it's like I have children that not letting me, to have a good night's sleep because they are, 2 years old. There are so many reasons that can affect that. So I just want to add that before you are asking me about different tips. Is that okay?
Sure.
Angela, can we move? Look, I skipped the questions of the tips. Can we move to how you see the BioSyncing and longevity?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that when you start to bring all of the things that we've been talking about, right? You're syncing your metabolism, your sleep, your training, your fitness, your hormonal health, all of that is helping you to have enhanced health span and lifespan. That's what we see. And I think that by really taking care of your metabolism, it helps to reduce inflammation. And we know that one of the key things that's linked to all of the chronic diseases that we're seeing is this concept of inflammaging. So if we can get inflammation as low as possible, and if you're always in stress mode and you're always burning glucose as a fuel and you're not transitioning properly between fats and carbs, that can be, that can cause more inflammation. And particularly, we were talking earlier around women in perimenopause. Unfortunately, we do see the metabolic issues, as you mentioned, of perimenopause, and that is increased inflammation, increased cortisol levels, increased oxidative stress, and reduced insulin sensitivity, as well as anabolic resistance. So actually, it's harder to gain new muscle tissue. And so in terms of when we can bring our bodies into sync with everything that we're doing and our lifestyle, we can start to make changes that positively impact our longevity. And when I talk about biosyncing and the bioindividuality of it, what I mean by that is we all have seasons in life, right? It's not, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like it would be lovely, for example, we were talking earlier about there around the increased mitochondrial benefits of doing endurance-based exercise, right? Of moving from 30 minutes to 45 minutes to 60, and maybe even there are extra benefits up to 90. Well, the season of life that I'm in with 3 kids and 2 businesses and 2 dogs and all this, it's not the time that I have actually to do this longer duration exercise. So, I will look at it and go, okay, I'm going to be syncing with my life stage and my goals and my family values and things at this point in time. And how can I do this in the most efficient way? And that's what I would encourage people to do is don't be so hard on yourself. Like, let's accept where we are and enjoy the ride, because each stage of life has really beautiful things to it that we want to be mindful mindful and enter into that moment. And so it's really working with you and yourself and the things you value to put those things first. And that helps you build priorities, right? And helps you make space for the things that matter. So I think sometimes syncing is actually about saying no.
Wow. I have to remember this, your answer to this question.
Eventually, it's like everything is about thinking. It's like when we are when we are good to our body, to our metabolism, when we are taking the smarter decisions, meaning when we are doing what our metabolism is need now, and what it needs now probably different from his needs tomorrow or the day after. So by all the time having that center, by all the time aligned all the actions to what our body really needs. So from one aspect, we avoid or getting far from chronic and metabolic disease. And from the other side, we promote and going toward longevity and, as you mentioned, quality of life. So it's like, it's by taking care our body engine, our metabolism, is like we're getting everything. We don't need to tackle longevity separate from avoid chronic disease, or separate from energy level or craving, or improve our sleep. It's everything is rooted in the same thing. The solution is the same solution, is one solution for everything.
Yes, and yet I think it's very nice what you mentioned. Like, you can do every time step by step, like tiny steps. You don't have to do everything now. Although there might be a lot of things you can do, you can try and pick one thing to do, since, I don't know, because it's a seasonal thing, right? If you don't have much time, so maybe just pick one thing that you find helpful. I think it's very also relate to what we try also to educate, right? You can find something that has the most impact on your health, and then you can continue from there. Angela, we don't left much time.
You are so responsible.
I am.
You are.
I know, this is my role between us.
Yes, it is. It's very nice that you are the responsible one, and I can just enjoy the conversation. Thank you, Angela.
Angela, but before we do finish, if there was like one thing, one message you would love our audience, our listeners to take home, what would that be?
I think it would be that you have way more control than you think you do, and that the small things truly count. I think if you can take one thing away from this and maybe share it with a friend, or share it in the Lumen community of the step you're going to take, because community is the other thing we haven't spoken about, which is highly correlated with longevity. And being around other people who also want to be healthy is extremely powerful, because you generally are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But I think understanding that we live in the modern age where we really can take charge of our health, and we have much more control over our health outcomes. And as you start to put one simple step in place, that is going to be the domino that leads to another thing and another thing over time. So that's what I would say is, I hope that you go away feeling empowered. And if I can go from where I was to where I am, hopefully you can see what's possible when you just make small changes over time.
Wow, Angela, that was beautiful. Seriously. Thank you
so much for being here with us. Thank you for your time.
Can I add one thing to all the audience? Any questions, follow questions that you have, please feel free to leave in the Facebook community of Lumen, and we will gather all the questions and we'll have a proper answer to everything. So please do.
Angela, thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's just been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that you've come away with just some really simple things that you can start doing.